Hello, and welcome back to The Behavior Code, the podcast that deciphers the hidden patterns in human interaction. I'm your host, Maria.
And I'm Gabriel. Great to be here. Today we're jumping into a topic that, well, it's something we all see in our friend groups, at work, even in our own families. We're talking about the psychology of being the quiet one.
Ooh, I love this topic. Because you're right, there's always one. That person who seems content to just sit back and listen while everyone else is, filling the air.
Right. And our society, especially Western culture, has a real bias towards extroversion, doesn't it? We celebrate the person who's loud, charismatic, the one who can command the room.
Totally, the life of the party.
And because of that, the quiet ones they get misunderstood, deeply misunderstood. People project all sorts of things onto their silence. They think they're uninterested or unhappy, or maybe even judging everyone.
Yeah, there's a vacuum, and we just rush to fill it with our own assumptions. But what we're going to get into today is that quietness isn't a vacuum. It's often a very full, very strategic space. There's a lot of power in that silence.
That's the core of it. We're going to unpack the stereotypes, explore the hidden advantages, and maybe even reframe quietness as a kind of social superpower. So let's start right there with those stereotypes.
Let's do it.
When you think quiet person, what are the first labels that pop into your head? For most people, it's things like shy, awkward.
Antisocial, weak, unconfident. And I've heard this one a lot from friends. They get labeled as arrogant or stuck up, like they think they're too good to join the conversation.
That's a huge one, the aloof label. And all of these are they're lazy interpretations. It completely missed the crucial distinction between, for example, shyness and introversion. They use them as if they're the same thing.
Right, but they're fundamentally different. So break that down for us.
Okay, shyness is rooted in social anxiety. It's a fear of negative judgment from others. A shy person might actually crave social connection, but their fear of saying the wrong thing holds them back. It's a painful, fearful state.
Fear-based.
Exactly. Introversion, however, is not about fear at all. It's about energy. It's about how your brain responds to stimulation. Extroverts get energized by social interaction. It charges their battery. Introverts find it draining. It depletes their battery.
So an introvert can be a totally confident, skilled speaker. They just have a limited social battery. After a while, they need to retreat to a quiet place to recharge.
Precisely. So that person in the corner at the party might not be shy or antisocial. They might have had a great time for 2 hours and are now just running on fumes. They're not being weak, they're managing their internal resources.
So they aren't antisocial, they're just selectively social, which is a huge difference. And it's not just a misunderstanding, it can be actively harmful. When you label a quiet student as disengaged, you might miss that they're actually your most attentive learner. When you pass over a quiet employee for a promotion because they're not visible, you might lose your most strategic thinker. These stereotypes lead to a huge loss of potential. And that's a critical distinction people miss. They see the quietness, but they don't see the why behind it. They attribute it to a character flaw like arrogance or a social deficit like shyness, rather than a simple biological or psychological need for a different kind of environment.
It's a world of difference. And because they're not spending all that energy on talking, they're free to do something else, something that gives them an incredible edge.
They observe. This is where we get into the real superpower aspect of it, the power of observation.
It really is. When you're not constantly formulating your next sentence or waiting for a gap to jump in, your brain is freed up to simply process what's happening. You're not just hearing the words, you're seeing the whole picture.
Give me an example, like in a workplace setting.
Okay, a team meeting. You've got 5 people talking over each other, trying to prove their point. The quiet one isn't just listening to the ideas, they're watching the dynamics. They see that when Sarah speaks, Tom subtly rolls his eyes. They notice the boss leans forward and nods at everything David says, but checks his phone when Maria is talking.
Right, they're not just on the surface level of the conversation. They're mapping the entire hidden social network of the room. The alliances, the resentments, the real power structures.
Exactly. They're picking up on the subtext. While everyone else is busy transmitting information, the quiet person is receiving it on multiple channels. They absorb far more data from any given interaction.
And because of that, when they do finally decide to speak, their contribution is often way more insightful.
It carries immense weight. It's not a reactive comment, it's a considered conclusion based on a deep reading of the room. They'll say something like, "It sounds like the real issue here isn't the budget, but that the marketing team doesn't feel heard." And suddenly, the whole conversation shifts. They cut right to the core.
It's like they see the whole chessboard while everyone else is just staring at their own next move. It's a huge strategic advantage.
It is, and yet, ironically, this very quality is what often makes other people so nervous around them. That quiet observation can be really unsettling.
Yeah, let's dig into that. Why does silence make people so anxious?
Well, there are a couple of powerful psychological forces at work. The first and most basic is that nature abhors a vacuum, and so do most conversations. When there's a pause, a silence, most people feel an overwhelming urge to fill it.
They get uncomfortable and just start talking, word vomit.
Exactly. They get nervous and overshare. They reveal information they didn't intend to. The quiet person becomes a sort of passive interrogator. They don't even need to ask probing questions. They just need to stay silent and information flows directly to them. It's a technique used by detectives and negotiators.
Wow, so you become a human truth serum just by shutting up. That's incredible.
It's a strange kind of power. The second reason is that quiet people are harder to read. Most of us are constantly broadcasting our thoughts and feelings through our words, our tone, our expressions. We're an open book.
But a quiet person, they're a closed book. You don't know what they're thinking.
And that uncertainty is threatening to the human brain. We are prediction machines. We want to know where we stand with people. When we can't get a read on someone, we get anxious. We start to fill in the blanks, usually with our own worst fears.
Are they judging me? Do they hate my idea? Do they think this shirt is ugly?
Exactly. When in reality, they might just be wondering if they left the oven on. The quiet person becomes a blank screen onto which we project our own insecurities. Their silence says very little about them and a whole lot about us.
That's so true. And it makes me think about another layer to this, the connection between being quiet and being perceived as intelligent.
Yes, the still waters run deep effect.
Exactly. Is there actual science behind that, or is it just a saying?
There's a lot of solid research there, particularly around introversion. Introverts' brains are wired differently. They have a higher baseline level of cortical arousal. This means they're more sensitive to external stimuli and are more naturally inclined toward inward focused activity.
Like deep thinking and analysis.
Precisely. This connects to the concept of deep work, popularized by Cal Newport. It's the ability to focus without distraction on a cognitively demanding task. In a world of constant pings and notifications, this skill is like a superpower. Quiet introverts are often naturally better at cultivating this state of deep focus.
So, while the extroverts are out there networking and collaborating, which is valuable, the introvert is more likely to be the one who sits down for 6 hours straight and cracks the complex code or writes the brilliant novel.
That's a good way of putting it. They're comfortable with the solitude that deep thinking requires. There's an old Taoist proverb, "Those who know do not speak. Those who speak do not know." It's a bit extreme, of course, but it captures the idea that true understanding often grows in silence, not in chatter.
This seems like a perfect bridge to our next topic, then quiet people in leadership. The common image of a leader is someone bombastic and charismatic, giving big speeches. But that's not the full story, is it?
Not even close. It's one of the great myths of the corporate world. When you look at history and even at modern business, so many of the most effective and transformative leaders were quiet introverts. People like Abraham Lincoln, Eleanor Roosevelt, Bill Gates, even Barack Obama.
Wow, that's a powerhouse list. So, what's the mechanism? What makes a quiet personality so effective in a leadership role?
There are a few key advantages. First, as we've established, they're exceptional listeners. A loud, extroverted leader can sometimes get so enamored with their own voice and vision that they steamroll their team. A quiet leader, on the other hand, is more likely to create space for others to contribute.
So they actually get more out of their people. They leverage the collective intelligence of the group better.
Much better. They're also less likely to make rash, ego-driven decisions. They tend to be more deliberate, more analytical. They do their homework. They think through second and third order consequences. This often leads to better, more sustainable long-term decisions.
And their calmness in a crisis can be incredibly reassuring for a team. They don't panic, they observe, analyze, and then act.
A steady hand at the helm, and that builds a tremendous amount of trust, which brings us to another huge social advantage of being quiet.
The trust factor. Yeah, I feel this intuitively. We tend to trust quiet people more. Why is that?
I think it's because someone who isn't constantly talking seems less needy. They're not desperately seeking attention or validation. Their silence projects a kind of self-contained integrity. They're not trying to sell you something all the time.
That makes sense. And because they're harder to read, it creates an air of mystery, which can be very appealing. We're drawn to what we don't fully understand. That mystery can often be interpreted as confidence.
That's a huge piece of it. A person who's comfortable in silence, who doesn't feel the need to fill every gap with noise, projects an immense amount of self-assurance. They seem grounded, centered. They're not performing for you, they're just being.
And in a world that is so incredibly noisy and performative, that quiet authenticity has a really powerful magnetic pull.
It really does. Now, having said all that, we have to be realistic. We've talked up all the advantages, but there are definitely times when being quiet is a clear disadvantage. It's not always a superpower.
Okay, yes, let's get into the other side of the coin. Where does being the quiet one hurt you?
Well, many modern workplaces are the first and most obvious example. In cultures that prize visibility and speaking up, the quiet person can become invisible. You can have the most brilliant idea in the room, but if you never voice it, you get no credit. The promotion goes to the person with a less brilliant idea who was more vocal about it.
The squeaky wheel gets the grease problem. It's not fair, but it's a reality. Your work doesn't always speak for itself. Sometimes you have to be your own advocate.
You have to. And think about situations that require rapid report building, networking events, first dates, job interviews. Your observational skills are still an asset, but if you don't provide any verbal input, the other person has nothing to connect with. You can observe your way right out of an opportunity.
That's a great way to put it. You can't just be a sponge. You have to give something back.
Right. So the goal for a naturally quiet person isn't to force themselves to become a chatterbox. That would be inauthentic and exhausting. The goal is to become strategically verbal.
So it's about learning to flex that speaking muscle in key moments, knowing when to observe and knowing when the most strategic move is actually to speak up, even if it feels a little uncomfortable.
That is the entire art of it. Use your quiet observation to identify the most high-leverage moment to intervene, and then make your point clearly and concisely. You don't have to dominate the conversation, but you have to participate in it when it matters.
Which brings us to our conclusion. After exploring all of this, what's the final code, the takeaway for our listeners who might identify as the quiet one?
The most important takeaway is this. Your quietness is not a character flaw. It is not a weakness that you need to fix. It is a temperament, a personality trait, and it comes with a formidable set of built-in strength.
It's not a bug, it's a feature.
Exactly. Own your ability to listen deeply, embrace your power of observation, cherish your capacity for deep thought and focus. These are the skills that solve the hardest problems and build the deepest trust. Don't let a loud world shout you down.
Instead, learn to understand your quiet nature as a hidden advantage. Know when to lean into it and know when to speak. Your silence doesn't mean you have nothing to say. It means you're waiting for the right moment to say something that matters.
A perfect summary. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of The Behavior Code.
Join us next week as we continue to decode the patterns of our lives. Until then, take care.